billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
Yeah, it just came out.
Our notes had it about 3.1 as well.
3.1,
3.2.
This came from us?
Yes.
President, does the issue give you as a real estate developer, what would you do with a project manager who would be over budget?
Generally speaking, what would I do? I'd fire him.
Do you think this issue, Mr. President, gives you cause to do that?
So we saw quite the interesting show earlier today at the Federal Reserve after Trump came face to face with Jerome Powell, who is, of course, the very Fed chair who is currently sabotaging the U.S. economy with his ridiculous and frankly mind-boggling decision to refuse to lower interest rates, despite the fact that virtually every other major nation with any comparable economy to ours on Earth has indeed done this. And the so-called tariff inflation that these people have been warning about is still non-existent, but is all, frankly, many are speculating here, due to a political agenda. However, with all of that in mind, it's worth noting that that was not even the primary subject of today's discussion. As a matter of fact, it turns out there may be even worse information on Jerome Powell than pure stupidity. And we're talking here about corruption after Trump very directly to Powell's face calls out the ridiculous show currently happening right now at the Federal Reserve building after he's being massively accused of basically wasting government money and even potentially lying to Congress with the so-called renovation of the Federal Reserve building, which many are asking serious questions here, why it's even necessary. I mean, you know, these people claim to preach the financial responsibility of our nation, and then you'll see what they're doing here. Meanwhile, I mean, we know how it really goes. But with all that said, we're going to tell you all about this situation on the economy, on interest rates, but this all tying back to the Trump-Jerome Powell confrontation at the Federal Reserve building today. First though, folks, as usual, if you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. You subscribing here, guys, is not only the best way to support our videos, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, so let's go through this one by one, because obviously the main MAGA and frankly normal people issue, the anger right now with Jerome Powell, comes over this decision to consistently claim he's not going to lower interest rates because of tariff inflation, despite the fact that's basically non-existent. And if you want a side-by-side comparison of how ridiculous that is, look at some of the world central bank interest rates right now. For instance, you look at Switzerland. Now, many European nations have been repeatedly lowering their interest rates. Switzerland right now is at 0.25%. Japan, by the way, who has higher inflation than us, as a matter of fact, they're in a period of stagflation at the moment, has 0.5%. And the story goes on, you know, Switzerland is number one, lowest interest rates in the world. The United States is number 45 here at 4.5% interest rates. The only nations higher than us include places like Cameroon, which is in Africa, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Guatemala, Israel, who is in a war right now, by the way. So, you know, that has its own impact on the economy. Mauritius, Norway, Republic of the Congo. Okay, so you basically get the idea. And just earlier this week, apparently President Trump sent this very letter to Jerome Powell saying, Jerome, you are as usual too late, which is also true, by the way, because there's a counter narrative here to be had that when it came to the Biden inflation, he was too late to actually raise the interest rates to slow that down, hence why it basically became a runaway problem. And now in the reverse, he's too late in terms of lowering the rates to obviously spur investment, economic growth, fixing the housing market, many other aspects of our economy. Going on here to say that you have cost the USA a fortune, which is true, by the way, on the front of the national debt, and continue to do so. You should lower the rate by a lot. Hundreds of billions of dollars are being lost due to those interest payments on the U.S. debt. And again here, no inflation signed by Donald J. Trump.
I think if Jerome Powell stepped down, it would be a great thing. I don't know that he's going to, but he should. Jerome Powell's been very bad for our country. We should have the lowest interest rate on earth, and we don't. He just refuses to do it, and yet He's spending $2.5 billion rebuilding the Fed, the Federal Reserve building. And I don't know what he knows about building, but you talk about cost overrun. So he got this approved, and he started the work during the Biden administration. And he doesn't look like the kind of a guy, frankly, that wants to spend $2.5 billion. And it's very interesting because out of 71 economists, one person, me, and then one other person, I think from Wharton, got it right, and the others were all wrong in terms of the success of our country this quickly. We have no inflation. We have cash pouring in. It was me and somebody else. Then I can tell you, I don't need 5,000 people working for me behind the scenes like Jerome Powell to tell him what he should say once a month, because they got it wrong. The Fed got it wrong. I call him too late. He's always too late. Every point cost us $360 billion. Think of that. And we should be 3 points. That's almost $1 trillion. Approximately $1 trillion less we should be just with the signing of a piece of paper. So we'll see what happens. I mean, you're telling me he's going to quit. I hope he quits. I don't know that he's going to quit, but he should quit because he's been very bad for the country.
Now, here's the thing. There's already plenty to be said about the incompetent and insane decision at this point to still be so stubborn about the interest rates. And by the way, as we'll talk about even later in the video here, is actually facing a lawsuit over this very decision. Okay, so Powell getting sued there for more transparency as to what is going on in these Fed meetings. Why are they doing this? The answer is pretty obvious. They are either, if not even Democrats, just establishment actors who essentially want to sabotage the Trump presidency, largely because they do not want him to be right about his sort of revamped economic approach to the United States, right? They don't want any, in their neoliberal philosophy, they don't want to make any concession that, hey, maybe protectionism does have a place in the 21st century. Maybe largely the expert class was wrong for many decades about how this type of stuff works. And that is the case. And we'll talk about that later in the video. But firstly, I think it is worth noting here that the problems for Jerome Powell do not simply stop at this issue of interest rates or just mere incompetence. There is a wider narrative here on corruption, because today the tour that President Trump went on of the Federal Reserve building is to assess a construction project that is currently being highly scandalized, not just for its extravagance, not just for its waste, likely corruption, but also on top of that, potentially even the fact that Fed Chair Jerome Powell lied to Congress, which would easily be a removable offense if Fed chairs were actually bound by the law. But apparently they seem to be above it, as are many people who are favored by the Democrat Party, as you know. But as Representative Anna Paulina Luna and many others here, by the way, have pointed out, the Fed Chair Powell has lied to Congress. Now, Paulina Luna has formally referred Jerome Powell to the Department of Justice for perjury and making false statements. The reason this is happening is because she is accusing him of misleading Congress about the $2.5 billion Eccles Fed building renovation. Essentially, what happened here in this hearing, a couple months ago, was that these Republicans mainly, but congressmen in general, were grilling him on the massive waste of this project. Essentially, why is it so expensive? And people pointed out, hey, you have VIP dining rooms, you have rooftop gardens, you have marble upgrades, all this stuff where it's like, hey, that's not an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars for the Federal Reserve building. What's going on here? And Powell denied that those things existed, when it turns out they did exist. And so this is why, again, he's being accused of lying to Congress, according to official documents that show no, the things he said were not happening, indeed were happening. He further here went on to claim that the Fed HQ never had a serious renovation, despite one happening from 1999 to 2003. So not only here does Luna want to push a federal probe on two questions, I think, frankly. First of all, what's with the extravagant, ridiculous upgrades at the Fed building? And then also, why is Jerome Powell lying about it? Like, there's two scandals, frankly, to be had there in one. But on top of that, the Federal Housing Finance Authority chair, this guy right here, Adam Pulte, who has been responsible, by the way, one of Trump's most underrated cabinet officials for bringing criminal referrals on people like Adam Schiff and Letitia James, is now calling for an audit and says there may be enough to terminate him for cause based on this scandal of essentially wasting $2.5 billion of taxpayer dollars on this ridiculous renovation. Take a listen for yourself.
Are you calling for an audit to happen on the renovations?
There needs to be an audit on the renovations at the Federal Reserve. I think people need to in a bipartisan fashion, call for an audit. We have $2.5 billion. Who spends $2.5 billion on a renovation? I mean, I couldn't even think about how to do that. I mean, you know how many movie theaters you'd have to put in it, and all kinds of spas and pools and hot tubs and everything? I mean, you'd have to really come up with some crazy stuff to spend $2.5 billion. So it smells to high heaven, and I think Jerome Powell's going to resign. And if he doesn't, I think there's enough there for cause to terminate him.
So again, that's the situation we are currently in. Not only is Jerome Powell an incompetent or malicious, bad Federal Reserve chair, but he's also corrupt on top of that. And frankly, that's the two worst possible combinations, right? Either be incompetent but sincerely stupid, or be kind of corrupt but be good at your job. He is, of course, neither. And that is why much of the pressure here is building, because basically, I think the administration, in a way, is sort of using this to their gain, to their benefit, but also it's a legitimate thing that ought to be pushed anyway. Essentially, okay, Powell, you're being this stubborn, you're being a bad Fed chair, you're not complying, you're not lowering the rates, and there's massive dirt on you, and there's all these problems relating to your job. So, of course, the situation right now is that Trump cannot formally fire Jerome Powell because of the way that the board Fed chair terms work. But if there's potentially some type of legal way you could get him or pressure him out of that position, then hey, why not bring up the fact that he is indeed massively screwing up right now, not just the U.S. economy, but indeed U.S. taxpayer dollars. So with all of that in mind, today, Trump indeed joined Jerome Powell in a rather awkward but also hilarious moment. You can see Powell there on the right to tour the Federal Reserve building, and well, the clips here speak for themselves. Take a listen.
I think we hear the president. Let's tune in.
With the chairman, as you know. Chairman, come on over. And we're just taking a look at what's happening. It's a tough construction job. They're building basements where they didn't exist or expanding them, and a lot of very expensive work. There's no question about it. And Tim has been with me for a long time, and you're in charge of the committee.
Indeed. One of the reasons why we wanted to see it was the overruns of the expenses, wanted to figure out why.
Yeah. So we're taking...
So already you notice a body language thing here. Powell wants to stand off to the side. He doesn't want to be near the cameras. The president is like, hey, come on, Jerome, get in here, right? And then look at him. He just looks so scared. He's just so timid. He's like, no one asked you a question. I'm just here, okay? Clearly doesn't want to be there. Quite hilarious. And then look at what ensues, because it gets even better.
Taking a look, and it looks like it's about $3.1 billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
Yeah, it just came out.
I noticed that at about 3.1 as well.
3.1,
3.2.
This came from us?
Yes.
You're including the Martin renovation. You just added
our entire capital.
Yeah, you just added in a third building is what that is. That's a third building.
Well, no, but it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago. We finished Martin 5 years ago.
It's part of the overall work.
But it's not new.
So we're going to take...
So mid thing, right? He's like, oh, I didn't hear about that. What? What's going on? Hands him the paper saying, here's the receipts. Powell's in denial. Quite hilarious. I don't know. How did he read the whole paper that fast? I don't even understand. Very fast reader. I mean, if that's true, you got to give Powell credit for that. But, I don't know.
Look, we're going to see what's happening, and it's got a long way. Do you expect any more additional cost overruns?
Don't expect them. We're ready for them. But we have a little bit of a reserve that we may use. But no, we don't. We expect to be finished in 2027. We're well along, as you can see.
Nice to take these off every once in a while when we're not under too much danger. So, any questions?
Mr. President, does the issue give you any...
As a real estate developer, what would you do with a project manager who would be over budget?
Generally speaking, what would I do? I'd fire him.
Do you think this issue, Mr. President...
So if it was hard to hear the question, what the reporter asked there is if, you know, you being in real estate, obviously that's your profession that you did for your whole life before the presidency. What would you do if you had a project manager, in this case, Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve building, who was running this much over cost, over budget, and having all these issues? I'd fire him. There was the answer. Look at the face of Powell. Amazing.
Well, I'm here just really with the chairman. He's showing us around, showing us the work. And so I don't want to get that. I don't want to be personal. I just would like to see it get finished. And in many ways, it's too bad it started. But it did start. And it's been under construction for a long time. It's going to be a real long time because it looks like it's got a long way to go.
Yes, sir.
So,
President, are there things the chairman can say to you today that would make you back off some of the earlier criticism?
well, I'd love him to lower interest rates. Other than that, what can I tell you? The country is doing really well. I just briefed the chairman on the deal we made with Japan. Japan is putting up $550 billion in order to lower their tariffs a little bit.
He's not going to do anything, right? Oh, what's the point of even telling this guy? I mean, Jerome Powell reads the news. He doesn't care. Again, the very point is he doesn't want Trump to be right about the tariffs, and so he's going to constantly fearmonger about some type of imaginary inflation. And ironically here, meanwhile, because he won't lower the rates, cause economic problems, right? Cause a lack of economic growth because everyone's sitting there waiting. You know, the housing market, people are waiting, but also business, right? No one really wants to invest or take out loans or do any of this stuff right now because they're waiting for the interest rates to change. And so you're going to see a slow growth in the economy because of it. Now, we can be resilient, obviously, and I think there's evidence we have, but still, right? And then he wants to basically turn around and say, oh, this is because of the tariffs. No, it's not because of the tariffs. It's because of your interest rate decision, right? But that is, of course, what is happening now here. Later on, outside the building, Trump had more choice words for Powell. So here you go. Take a listen for yourself.
It's a very complex thing that could have been made simple. I built a great hotel, and the great hotel that everybody in this group knows very well, it's called the Old Post Office, and it's a much bigger project than this, and I spent $200 million building it. And it was taken down to the steel, for the most part, taken down, you know, you've seen it go up. And I built it quickly, and I built it for $200 million. That was a much bigger job than this. Spent $200 million, and it's got marble bathrooms, the top fixtures, the best of everything, all brand new. So, you know, this is a very expensive job. I don't know, it got out of control. And that happens. It's a shame.
Trump now further here goes on to state in his official statement about this matter, saying, quote, "It was a great honor to tour the renovation and some new construction of the Federal Reserve building with Chairman Jerome Powell, Senator Tim Scott, and others. It's got a long way to go. Would have been much better if we were never started, but it is what it is, and hopefully it will be finished ASAP. The cost overruns are substantial, but on the positive side, our country is doing very well and can afford just about anything." Again, I think the great irony here, right? As you so often see to be the case, the Federal Reserve is in charge of basically managing our economy itself in terms of what they do with interest rates, you know, the printing of money, all this different stuff. And they can't even write a budget correctly. And they're telling you, trust me, we know how tariffs work. We know how inflation works. You know how anything works. I mean, it's like, how are you going to deal with macroeconomics if you can't even deal with the microeconomics of making your balance sheet balance? I don't even understand, right? But okay, anyways, here you go. Furthermore, even the cost of this building, I'll be watching and hopefully adding some expertise. As everyone knows, I renovated the old post office on Pennsylvania Avenue, which turned later on into the new Trump Hotel, and it was a roaring success. The total construction cost was a small fraction of the Fed building's cost, and it is many times the size. Isn't it interesting how that works? With all of that being said, let's get it finished, and even more importantly, lower interest rates. Well, of course, that arguably is the most important narrative of this story. It's the thing that affects the most Americans. But with all of that in mind, okay, if the Fed chair wants to be this stubborn, if he wants to basically have a battle about this, and there's massive problems with the way he's even running his job on a local day-to-day basis, then indeed that is something that ought to be looked at. Now, with all of that in mind, as the Federal Reserve prepares to meet next, and I believe it'll be September, it is further worth noting that the head of Azoria, the CEO here, James Fishback, who's been making a lot of moves in the movement lately, has come out and stated that he will indeed be suing Jerome Powell, taking him here to federal court this morning to demand that the next week's Federal Reserve building, so I guess next week we should say, Federal Reserve meeting, I should say there. So next week's Federal Reserve meeting be open to public observation as required by federal transparency law. Because isn't it so funny generally how that works? And this is, of course, a trend long predating Jerome Powell. There's a case to be made. The very nature of the Federal Reserve and the way it was made and the way it is run is incredibly shady to begin with. But still, nonetheless, Congress has to be public in their meetings. They have to do, public hearings very often, right? Supreme Court even. There's some stuff that gets recorded. There's a transcript of what happened, the arguments, the oral stuff, all that. Why does the Federal Reserve, which is also a branch, not a branch, but an aspect of our government, I guess you could say in some ways, right? Why do they not have to operate here in transparency? Well, take a listen here to the announcement of that lawsuit from Fishback for yourself.
The truth of the matter is that inflation is now at a 4-year low under President Trump's leadership, 5 consecutive better than expected, lower than expected inflation readings, and the Federal Reserve refuses to lower rates from a 20-year high. That is a life-altering decision that affects Americans all over the country. They can't get a mortgage, they can't get a home, they can't start or grow their family. Azoria is now suing Jerome Powell in federal court this morning to demand that next week's meeting be open to public observation as federal transparency law requires.
Well, I'd love to see the outcome of that lawsuit, but I think there's a reason they don't want to be transparent, because guess what? What do you think that meeting consists of? Oh, Donald Trump's so bad. It's like the Legion of Doom basically meeting. How can we destroy Donald Trump this time around, The tariff inflation, it's going to happen. Trust me, bro, it's going to happen, right? Or even perhaps the reality that comes out that they're making the decisions completely arbitrarily and there's no really basis for what they're doing. I mean, what a sight to behold that would be for the American people. So we'll see what happens. Rooting for Fishback and Azoria on this front. They've been doing a lot of good work lately. But yeah, to make a long story short here, not only is Jerome Powell a highly incompetent and stupid Federal Reserve chair, as you can see, he's also highly corrupt. And that is another case in which Trump is indeed correct about this. And people are saying, oh, Jerome Powell is just a non-partisan, non-political actor. He's doing the best for the country. No, he's not. No, he's not. All right, with that said, though, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.